Mindset Athlete podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition and mindset coaching business. First of all, I'd like to thank Lauren Williams for suggesting this quote to the show. An athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think and execute. Not because of some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete. By Chris Hart. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Madeleine Ruff. Madeleine was diagnosed with osteosarcoma at the age of 16 when a tumour was found in her left ankle. She ultimately won her year-long battle with cancer, but not before earning a few battle scars, including the amputation of her left leg. While studying voice at the University of Miami's Frost School of Music, Madeleine began penning fan favorites like Close the Door and Don't Fall, the title tracks of her debut album. Her experience during cancer treatment provided the inspiration for another favorite on the album, the emotional charge Tell Me Not to Worry, which she began writing during a fever-ridden drive to the hospital. As a two-time cancer survivor and amputee, Madeleine performs on a high-heeled prosthetic leg that she has jokingly referred to as her Barbie foot. Madeleine's confidence, maturity, and sense of humor shines in her songs. The Daily Freeman counted Don't Fall among the top 10 regional albums of 2013. With her follow-up album, Maddy makes one thing clear. Whether it's cancer or dating in New York, she's over it. So welcome onto the show, Maddy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is absolute mine. So beyond the initial introduction, and I did stumble through it a little bit, which you found hilarious. So I was
feeling dated bio, yeah.
So beyond that, obviously, what little nugget would you like to add on to that to give to my audience?
About me personally or about my music? Or
well, really? I'll leave that out completely up to you.
Okay. That bio is meant to sell me as a musician, and yes, a lot about my story is in there, but it's a little campy. It's a little it's all real. It's all very real. But other than Madeleine Ruff, the musical artist, local singer-songwriter in New York City, I am relatively present in the amputee community on social media. I've worked in the hospitality industry in New York City for 10 years. I work private events performing. That's a very small nugget of the world that I live in that encompasses the Maddy Ruff universe. Yeah.
Do you think, obviously, having your amputation for long, since you're 16, has helped you, obviously, from dealing with, and we discussed this a little bit before we started recording, be it with working in the service industry and dealing with, obviously, the negativity from a no perspective of the music industry?
How do I think being an amputee relates to
do you think that's helped you?
Do I think it's helped me? Yes and no. I think that because I went through this really traumatic experience in this weird way, I emote with people a little bit, and I think I'm more sensitive to people. I think sometimes if I'm having a bad day, maybe it's the opposite. It's oh, this person is complaining about this little thing. If only they knew. But I think that it's helped me in patience and understanding where other people are coming from, and maybe given me a little bit of a tougher skin, a thicker skin. I do think that there are definitely moments when I've been doubted, whether in both in the service industry and in the performance industry, and have just had to work a little bit harder just to prove myself. I don't know if that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. What do you put it down to? Do you think it's an adaptation to the environment, or you think you've mastered a way that's going to obviously prove not to yourself, but prove to others, obviously you're capable, more than capable, even with that adversity people see in front of them?
I think that anytime I approach a new job, a new gig, a new position, I always let my employers know my situation, and I let them know that being an amputee has never been an issue. If there is some kind of emergency situation, just so they know what's going on with me. But I think that people have been doubtful, but me just doing my job and doing the best that I can in whatever I'm doing, it has always proved like, okay, there's nothing to worry about. Even though I'm not like everybody else, I am capable of doing the job as well as or better than anyone else in the establishment. I think
and do you think that's obviously transference of, and this is probably where people who I've spoken to, be it clients or the older generation, why do you think you and I are more comfortable, and this is probably a generalization a little bit because I don't want to put words into your mouth, why do you think obviously they have that constraint when it comes to talking about the disability and wanting to hide away to it and want to be judged solely on their abilities, whatever field that may be, based on maybe the younger generation putting at the forefront, and you need to accept this as well as my abilities?
I think that I want to be judged on my capabilities and my abilities to do things, but I do think that there's a little bit of a shameful, it might be like a strong word to say, but in older generations, being disabled, I'm going to use the word, but we don't use that word anymore, cripple, is that was the connotation with being disabled. And now we're handy capable and we're proud of our disabilities, and we accomplish whatever we need to get done during the day despite what's going on, and that's something to be celebrated. I think that in previous generations, it was something, I'm talking like this could be 100 years ago or it could be 50 years ago. I think that technology has both in like computer science and the development of better wheelchairs and prosthetic devices and things like that have made life a little bit easier for disabled people, but also both physically and mentally. I think that we have access to each other, and this whole celebrating yourself and loving yourself movement that's kind of happening right now, not even just in the disabled community, I think has made it something to be celebrated and worn on your sleeve rather than being hidden, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But obviously, what do you put it down? Because obviously, from a physical standpoint, we discussed it, and I'll bring it up. Be it, you mentioned there with people with obviously resulting to wheelchairs or crutches versus using their prosthetic, and I'll bring it up because I'm quite happy to take the heat with it. Be it from a basis of obviously when people are resorting to those facts of utilizing probably more so the wheelchair. Do you think that those individuals, to some extent, when they don't resort to wanting to change or be adaptable to try something new, be it because it's out of their comfort zone, do you think they're not accepting of obviously the ultimatum, what lies ahead of them? Obviously, and nobody likes to talk about this, but the thing that's obviously at the end of that is you shrivel up and you die. Do you think from your basis more specifically, obviously you're not thinking about that because obviously you're a little bit more positive in mindset, but be it you were willing to obviously look at exercise and training from a more open approach to, you were willing to like look at it from a trial and error perspective?
Well, that's like a very long question. I think that people who I'll put it into the amputee bubble because that's what I'm more familiar with. People that either live on crutches or in chairs, it could be one of two things. either the world outside is terrifying to them, to be out in the world as an amputee, and it's easier to just not try. I think that there are people that are like that. I think there are also people who have had very negative experiences with prosthetics, and worked with people that their prosthesis wasn't fit correctly. It's, you know, it's a journey. It's a custom piece to your body. You need to be working with the best people. And I've been really lucky to, from the get-go, be with an amazing team at a step ahead. I don't know if you saw that in my little universe. But the other factor in that is also cost. And especially in the States, it's just astronomical to afford a custom fit prosthesis. It's just, if you don't have health insurance, which is a whole other topic altogether, it is virtually impossible to be a person with pre-existing conditions, let alone missing a limb, and getting the proper devices needed to live your life. So that's part one to the question. I think that what makes me what was this? The second part was,
what makes you so open-minded and kind of looking at
okay,
in terms of looking at it from being flexible with it?
I actually have been, and I I use this word in like an interesting way, lazy, like physically lazy for most of my adult life. Just despite the fact that I work on my feet like 40 plus hours a week, but I never went to the gym. I hated it. I didn't want to try new things. More out of, there was this like a sense of embarrassment if I fail. Like if I fail as an able-bodied person, okay, whatever. But like if I fail as an amputee, I felt like this double kind of shameful thing, which is so silly because if anything, I should get a pass, right? I should get a pass for not being able to complete a task because I have, you know, a piece of me missing. But yeah, I think it just getting a little bit older and more confident and being out in the world for longer. It's just like, why not? What is the worst thing that happens? The worst thing that happens is I fall, or the worst thing that happens is I can't do this thing, but you have to try. So I don't think that I was always as gung-ho about doing new stuff. But in the last 2 years, I've gotten very into physical fitness and found things that I love doing. And I think that seeing progress in yourself is the biggest motivator ever. Like being able to do something that was really, really difficult for you and now it's becoming easier, and now, oh, I can do this other thing. Physically seeing results is, it's just so exciting and motivating, and inspiring for yourself. And I think doing that has pushed me to try new things out in the world. I was really into horseback riding as a kid before my amputation, but I hadn't been back on a horse in like over 10 years. And I've ridden horses twice in the last 6 months. I hadn't been on a bicycle. First, I had tried a little bit as a younger amputee and just got really nervous, and just go do it. If I can hang out upside down for 2 minutes, then I can go ride a bike, or I can at least try, I don't know if that was a very long-winded answer to your question. I hope that.
No, but I'm going to touch upon a few points where you come in there, and I'll get your point of view in terms of, obviously, from the mental perspective. Now, and this is probably the coach aspect coming in. Do you truly believe that you were lazy?
That I what?
That you were lazy.
That I was lazy. I've never been a lazy person. I always work hard, whether it was in school or at a job. I'm always very organized and disciplined. But I hated working out. And that's where I say I was lazy. I would rather watch some Netflix than go to the gym and do a couple of sets of something. What if I'm looking at it now? Yes, I call it lazy, but I think maybe some of it was fear, and maybe some of it was embarrassment. It's not like I never went to the gym. I would go maybe once every couple of months or something like that. But it wasn't a priority, and it wasn't part of my life the way that it is now. Yeah. But lazy maybe. Is it still lazy if it's easier to not do something? What do you think?
No, I'd call that convenient.
Okay, so it was convenient to not take care of my body and go to the gym. I don't know. Yeah, but maybe lazy is not the right word, because in other aspects of my life, no, I've never been a lazy person. Yeah.
Well, I think it does come down to the language that people use, and be it obviously you're more easily inclined to gravitate towards laziness when you don't want to do something. But then, in fact, when you talk about Netflix, that's convenience. You're doing something that obviously you enjoy. Obviously, from a basis of priorities, it's not the right time.
I don't know if it's priorities. I feel so much better going to the gym and hanging out upside down than I do after binge watching Netflix. Like that's definitely better for me and makes me happier. But I think it was a motivational thing too. Like I'm more motivated to sit on the couch than to go do something physically active, you know? Yeah. But that just became the normal for me, or the norm for me. Yeah.
Well, I think we have to remember that. Obviously, it's going to the gym, doing something that you've never done before. You could put it down to fear of the unknown. You don't know what quite to expect. Are you going to make a fool of yourself? And obviously, all the things that go with it, be it peer pressure, embarrassment, shame if you do something wrong. But I think if you don't try, ultimately, where do you find yourself? You're still stuck in that same position.
And touching on that, it's so funny. Like, no one at the gym cares what you are doing. No one, the other people that are there doing their workout do not care what's going on with you at all. And I kind of relate it to, a teenager who has a pimple on their face and they think that everybody's staring at it, but nobody really notices it. I feel that way about going to the gym or trying something new or being in a class or whatever it is. Like, nobody cares what you're doing. They care about themselves. They're worrying about what they're doing. So I think the whole like shame and embarrassment thing is really all about how you feel about yourself. And it's funny. I'm a representative of the amputee community, but I'm not. It's not part of my day to day because I live out in the world where pretty much everyone I interact with is a fully able-bodied person. So friends of mine who haven't really been into fitness have now been coming to me for advice, and they're so intimidated by the gym. And it's just this kind of funny, like, oh, we all have that. We all carry that. It doesn't matter if you're disabled or not. Everybody has some kind of sense of like shame or embarrassment or a fear of the unknown.
Yeah. Well, if I go a step further than that, Maddy, and say, obviously, I think people have a precursor, be it when they're new to a new situation. And okay, I'll use your example of the gym. If you relate that to me, somebody that's a bodybuilder, a gym buff, we've all been at the very beginning. It just happened to be a very, very long time ago. So if people can relate to that, and those individuals, be it coaches and people a little bit more advanced, put their ego aside and very much not point the fingers as we're talking in January, it'll be the busiest time of the year for people getting started. Like from a resolution perspective, we'll be the part of the population pointing, well, you're a nuisance because you're getting in the way of me having to change certain aspects of my routine to be able to get a good workout. And if we were a little bit more supportive, which I'm very much in, if you can give them that supporting hand and say, well, don't be apprehensive because you're already there as it is when you're coming in the door in the first place. So it's to be commended and say, well, what can we do to support you? Obviously, there's going to be different individuals along the way. Be it some are going to be a little bit supportive when they think and reflect upon they used to be that individual once upon a time, be it a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, etc. And then obviously you're going to have those people that never change and always going to be, well, you're a nuisance to me. You're going to be gone come March time anyway. But if we could
but
be a
maybe
little
they
bit...
won't be if maybe they won't be if there's a you or there's a me that's like, hey, never seen you here before. Like, do you need help with that? You know, if there's a personal like connection to a place, I think that maybe that person will be more inclined to continue on. But who knows?
No, it's willing to extend that hand, because obviously people are more frightened to ask the question of or say I'm new, I'm not quite sure what to do. And obviously I've seen it at the forefront because I've been that trainer in the gym environment that has to show people around. So you can tell the new people versus somebody that's maybe had a break. In terms of, it is frustrating for me when you have to have I can't think of the word now, showing around the gym, and I'll use it as that, and I'll get slated probably for not knowing the name, but I probably get a quicker one because like, well, I want to do this as a goal, this. What equipment do I need to use? But I know what I'm doing, so I can relate that to the person.
In my situations, it's usually friends or people through social media that reach out to me, and I'm like, hey, I'm not an expert, but this is what I do, and this is what I figured out for myself. And hey, come over to my place. Let's use my gym. Let's work out together. You know, most of them never come over, but but it's just been interesting seeing that the trepidation that people have going in that I had probably like tenfold inside me. And it's kind of, it's been rewarding and like also kind of amusing that it's come like full circle for me. It's like now I'm the person that people are coming to. It's completely bizarre. I actually did a series of little videos for a very good friend of mine she lives in New Orleans now. And she was like, Maddy, I really want to start working out. And you've been so inspiring. And I'd love to talk to you about it. I said, oh, let me just take some videos of me working out. I was like so goofy and talking to the camera and did a series of whatever things on my cell phone. And I sent them to her. And I guess she had a workout buddy and they both watched them and they loved it. Like, you should start doing this. This is great. You're so relatable. I was like, oh, no way, just for you. But I was like, oh, it was nice. It was a very rewarding little thing that I never in a million years would think that I was would be doing a year ago. That anyone would ever ask me for advice in that realm. So that's cool.
Do you think it's helped with the likes of social media and I mean probably the likes of probably Instagram or Pinterest and maybe Twitter more specifically than say Facebook?
I don't really use Facebook I never use Twitter, and I pretty much forward all of my Instagram stuff to my Facebook. But yes, I think that like Instagram, it's basically memes, music, fitness, and like beauty stuff right now, right? So from a personal perspective, I think that social media has actually been a motivational factor in my consistency, in my like remaining consistent in my fitness journey. I think that we all post things for the right reasons and the wrong reasons, but feeling this probably like pressure that I create myself for sure to have content and to have something out there is motivating me to continue to like, okay, I got to go upside down for at least 15 minutes today. I got to get that in. Which, I mean, it's not like anybody is relying on that, but I've had a bunch of people send me messages say, oh my gosh, your headstand.
But do you know that for a fact though? There might be one person like, oh, you've not come on at this particular time.
Yeah, you're right. There might be one person who's just like, oh, where's Matt's upside down video? But I have had, not just having it out there and having, seeing the views, but I've had a fair amount of messages from friends of mine or people in the amputee community, especially. I've definitely gained a small following in the amputee community, who reach out to me and say things like, wow, your journey upside down has been so inspiring. How do you do this? What can I do in this situation? And again, I'm not an expert. I tell them what I do. And at the beginning, I mean, I'm still struggling. I'm still like pushing myself and probably doing things incorrectly every once in a while. But that persistence is progress. That's something that I like to say. Like if you're persistent, if you're doing it, that's progress. Even if you're not seeing it immediately. So yeah.
Well, that's where most people fall foul of it, because they feel that they are not doing it in the correct way. And I mean like 100% of the time, more from a perfectionist standpoint. Mm-hmm. And then I'll relate it to that's procrastination, because you either never get it done because you're looking for perfection, and then the other forward, well, I can't do it because I want it to be 100%. And I think from an amputee perspective, that's impossible, because not one day is ever going to be the same. And you need to be adaptable, persistent, and a little bit have this flexibility of doing it on the fly, because obviously there's going to be times where you can do it with your prosthetic, and there's going to be times that you can't do it with your prosthetic. And there's not saying those days you need to take a rest. Obviously, there's the days where, I don't know, you're not able to walk, be it from a medical standpoint. That would, I was obviously be adamant to say, well, you need to take a rest because that's your body telling you you're doing too much. But being fixated in terms of there's only one single way of doing things, I think from an amputee, it's ridiculous. I think it's probably easier as an amputee in that respect, because you can be adaptable. You can be a little bit transformative in terms of like a transformer. You can do it. You can do the same exercise at least two different ways.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, obviously, it is more physically difficult to do everything as an amputee. So I don't know if I'd agree with you in every way, shape, and form in that statement. But yeah, I mean, I notice a difference when I do certain activities with or without my prosthesis. And I can relate this to, I really love doing headstands. I love hanging out upside down. And it's always been easier for me because I have a little bit more mobility without my prosthesis on. But yeah, I've recently been trying to do things with it on, and I've just been falling over all over the place. It's been kind of a mess. But sorry, my internet connection went a little weird. But it's a whole other route to strengthening and working on my core and my center of balance, having that. So yeah, I guess it's I don't know. I'm rambling a bit, but
so what would be the exact point that you disagree on?
There are two ways. Yeah, there are two ways to do everything.
On the disagreement point, what's the exact point then?
It's the fact that I can't squat like a normal person. I can't do A, B, C, D. I can't do these exercises that I look up on the internet because my body just won't move that way. I don't have, obviously I'm talking to an expert, so I'm sure you could show me some modifications of things.
Well, it's modifying the exercise, and be it, I've written a book on it, because I had a limb charity come to me and say, "Oh, James, could you come up with solutions for not just leg amputees?" I had to think outside the box, be it for quads, people with arm amputee. So I've spoken to an amputee in Australia. I said, can you have a look over it, because there's probably something I've forgotten from, be it being a leg amputee. There's probably something that I've probably overlooked, be it from an arm amputation within the leg perspective. I'll look at, well, this is what I am capable of, a single amp, as above. This is what I expect of below me to be able to do based on having more functionality, and do a spectrum. And here you go. And give, I've given opportunity to a few people that I've got close to have a look at that and give feedback on it in terms of what's missing in terms of that resource for the betterment of everybody. So that's looking to fill the gaps in terms of what you're mentioning, or Phil mentioning, in terms of what's missing, be it from the mainstream obviously from a training perspective, it's very difficult because there's probably millions of different exercises that you could use as an able body perspective. So it's probably, as trainers who have the disability, more specifically amputation, sitting down together collectively and coming up with a resource. But that's putting ego aside, which is probably more difficult.
No, I think it's amazing that that's even happening right now, because like even 10 years ago, like this discussion may not have been happening on such a wide platform. Going back to saying that it is more difficult. As an amputee, I have to find someone like you who, or figure it out on my own, modifying something, or like, how do I access this muscle group if I don't have this other muscle group on my body? And the second part of that is, and this is something that I've been struggling with a lot. I'm taking care of myself. I'm motivating. I'm seeing results. Oh my gosh, I gained all this muscle and I lost all this fat, and now my leg doesn't fit anymore and I can't walk. Or I bruised the crap out of my bone because I've transformed my body, which I'm sure is another conversation that you've had.
What do you do it from that basis? Because obviously I segment the world into be it, people insurance and people with public healthcare, be it the Brits or the Australians. What would you do in that circumstance? Because obviously that's probably an argument an amputee would come into work with me to change it for the betterment. And obviously then now we have a problem from insurance purposes because it no longer fits from a different perspective.
I can only speak from my personal experience, and I've been very lucky. I was not anticipating having to get a new prosthesis once I underwent the basically body transformation. I would say it was last summer or 2 summers ago. There was this is a very personalized story. I had a new prosthesis made, and I had my other legs that I have modified to fit that new socket I had fit. My fitness journey had started, but not as aggressively as I work out now. In, I guess it was like a year and a half to almost 2 years, my body changed so much. I didn't realize, I honestly did not realize that my prosthesis was so ill-fitting. I just had a new prosthesis made and delivered at the beginning of December. And I was actually out at a step ahead yesterday doing some adjustments on it to make sure I'm all good to go. But I was working out on an ill-fitting prosthesis for basically almost a year, and struggling at work. And I didn't even realize. I thought that there was something wrong with my residual limb. I was unaware. I lost 2 centimeters of circumference on my residual limb, which is a lot. That's a lot. I don't know if the rest of the world would kind of relate to that statement. But I'm in the middle of kind of that scenario we're talking about. I've had a new prosthesis made, but the other legs that I have for other, functions in my life, I can't wear them. And I was very lucky that the insurance I have through my work right now, it was still a really big copay, took care of this new prosthesis. But I'm about to go back in 2 weeks to assess the situation with the rest of my legs and see if I can have them modified. If I can't, I'm going to have to start from scratch, which means having, okay, I need a cosmetic high heel leg for performance. I need, a fixed non-cosmetic as a backup, or, whatever it ends up being. But I have no idea if I'm going to be able to afford it. I don't know what insurance is going to accept or deny. And that's really scary. It's really scary. I can walk. I have one leg that fits me right now, and I can walk and I can go to the gym and I can, dance around. But moving forward, I have to have the other leg options. And a lot of people don't realize that amputees have different prosthetics for different things. if they have the luxury to have that. But to live in the modern world, I live here in New York City. I'm a performer. I need these things to do my job. And whether or not American insurance companies are going to recognize that, that's a whole other conversation to have. And we'll see what happens. I'll shoot you an email in 2 weeks when I go out. But yeah, it's scary. It's scary, and it can be very, very discouraging for sure.
Do you think that's why some American amputees are reluctant to have a body transformation in that case then?
I don't think so. I don't think it's even a thought. Because at least again, from my perspective, it wasn't a thought for me. I didn't think about it until weight became such a big issue. Because, and this is something that you, I'm sure, know a lot about, and I don't even think about it that often. I weigh more than I did, 2 years ago, but my body is completely different, and a lot of that has to do with muscle mass, and where those changes happen on your body and how it affects your residual limb. And I'm not sure that an amputee that's deciding whether or not to become physically active, I don't think that they're thinking about the fit of their prosthesis. I think that there's so many other things weighing on them before that. But I mean, I can only relate it to myself. It was more of like a self-worth, a self-image versus like, what am I going to do if I lose weight and my leg doesn't fit? Like that was nowhere in my mind at all at that point.
But should you contemplate it from a preparation standpoint then, so that you do have, not necessarily it's in the back of your mind, but you've got it written down that this is a possibility, that this is going to be an obstacle down the line?
Now it is. And now I'm, there are certain things that I want to accomplish with my body, but I also, because I've experienced this struggle with the fit of my prosthesis, I also want to stay within like a 5-pound range. Like I have this number in the back of my head of like, okay, we need to stay consistent. If we talking about myself as we, me and my leg, if we take a week off, if it's the holidays or whatever, you have to be careful. You have to be careful. But I've been more conscious of that in the last like 6 months than I probably ever have been in my life as an amputee, just because I went through this kind of nightmare situation of living in an ill-fitting prosthesis and not even being aware of it really, until I finally went out to see my guys at a step ahead. And they're like, Maddy, how have you been walking on this? This is so not okay. Like, we need to get you all fixed up. So yeah.
Well, you adjust. That's based on probably an amputee speaking to an amputee. You adapt. Your body is obviously going to change anyway. Not from that basis that you're talking about. It's probably not good, but we probably all do it in terms of, well, we're going to result to going to get it fixed for the adjustments when you've told us. The body adjustments we've had to deal with over years. So it's to kind of, you probably blanket over it and think of it, oh, it's not a bit, I'm sore here, I'm sore there, I'll put it down to something else as opposed to the limb. And then obviously they'll say they'll differ, but they don't have to experience that in most cases. And most probably prosthetists aren't amputees themselves, so they don't have I won't say an empathy, but they can't relate from you just trying to get on with your life, which I'll hear from people occasionally, but then it will be, I still have a struggle with this. So have you come to terms from acceptance with this belief or not? But based on what you were saying, I think you get on with it anyway, because you don't put it down to that being the root cause.
Yeah, I definitely power through. I've never been like, oh, I'm not going to work today because my like bone is bruised on my residual limb. I just put on more sock ply and I get on with my day. I mean, I've definitely said to my prosthetist when I've been having, a tough time, it's just like, I just want to be, I don't want to have to worry about how difficult it is to change my shoes. I just want to be able to get up and go. And I have had so many, I don't want to call them mobility issues because I'm still working 40 plus hours a week on my feet and I'm still going to the gym, but I was in pain. And that's really the factor. It's like, it shouldn't be pain management. You should be comfortable. And it had hit this point where, and I mean, I'm still adjusting to this new prosthesis. There's still, things to figure out, but it hit this point where I was just like, what, if it's not one thing, it's the other thing. Like that, I was just so like, something has to be wrong. Something has to be wrong with me or my prosthesis, because I know that in the rest of my life as an amputee, I have not been in this much kind of pain. And I went to go see my surgeon because I was afraid that I had some kind of scar tissue buildup that was rubbing in my prosthesis. And it was like, no, it's just I had lost, and I do have a little bit, which is totally normal. But nothing had changed. It's just that I had lost mass on my residual limb, and whatever scar tissue I had was like basically grinding up against the inside of my prosthesis. So it's like too much information, but yeah, I feel like I got off topic with your question.
But when it results to that, Maddy, do you think, obviously, because you and I were discussing this beforehand, you don't get too engrossed within those kind of communications within Facebook groups, but be it when people do say things, my prosthetic doesn't fit, it does alarm me sometimes that people don't use common sense at times, because obviously ultimately it shouldn't matter what somebody else's opinion is of what you're experiencing or feeling at that particular moment. You should use some common sense and say, how is it impacting me, and then do it. So I think from an actional standpoint, you saying it being problematic, and you obviously go into the worst case scenario in within your mind and then working your way back. But obviously when you do see things like that, you're thinking, you've obviously thought of it to be a problem because you want to bring it to the forefront and get people's opinions. But this is coming back to my point in terms of procrastination. You could have been a little bit more pragmatic and picked up the telephone and rang your clinic in that same time frame, based on whether it was open or closed. But you could have done that and been a little bit more proactive in terms of getting the right information from the right people.
Right. Absolutely. I think that I could have. I think that I have a really high pain tolerance, and I was just kind of like, okay, let's just keep chugging along. Yeah, I think I waited until everybody has a different threshold, and I waited until I couldn't anymore. Could I have gone out to see my prosthetist earlier? Yeah, absolutely. It takes me 2 hours to get there, just so you know. So I'm sure there was a bit of procrastination as well. But I've been out there, oh my gosh, like my weekends are generally Mondays and Tuesdays. I've been out there like almost every other like Monday or Tuesday for like the last month. And it's exhausting. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's exhausting and it's stressful, but yeah, you hit a point where you like, it's like, okay, well, I can't live like this anymore. So I've got to do something about it. And I think that point is different for everyone. And like circling back to what we were talking about at the beginning, I think that some people don't hit that point and they just give up. It's like, oh, well, this just isn't working for me, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And yeah, I think that circles back to people that end up sitting in a chair and not doing everything within their capability to have a more mobile life, or the most mobile life that they can possibly have. Yeah.
So what would your advice, and obviously ultimately it's your opinion, what would your kind of recommendation be for that that person or people when they hit that fork in the road?
I actually, this was a few years ago, I weirdly enough came across an amputee in one of my hospitality jobs, who I had seen around, but he was never wearing a prosthesis. It's kind of a little story, that'll answer the question. And obviously this person was out in the world and living their life, but they were living their life on crutches, and he didn't realize that I was an amputee, and someone had told him. So he eventually came in and had a little chat with me. And he'd had an experience where he was sent to a prosthesis that was not fantastic. And the fit was off, and it was really painful, and it was just more comfortable to not wear it. And he was like, well, maybe this is just the life that I'm going to live, without having gone to see a different prosthetist or, talk to amputee forums about the discouragement and the pain of the struggle that he was experiencing. And I was so happy that he came across my path. And I sent him to my prosthetist, Eric, at a step ahead, who I believe that he's now a happy client and walking around. I saw him a few months later, and he was walking on his prosthesis like a changed man, just with like confidence. It was this beautiful thing to see. So I would say to a person who is, probably the people that have given up are in a very, very dark place, but here are these resources. This is my experience. I'm sure you've had a really, really rough go of it. But there are other options. And I also use myself as an example. Like, look at me. Look at you. We're doing all this stuff that a lot of people that are able-bodied don't. There's so many things you can accomplish if you have the self-motivation, you have the positive mindset. And we aren't always there. I definitely get dark sometimes as well. And I get frustrated, especially when I'm in pain, but there are resources out there. And, look at all of these amazing, inspiring, able people. And don't look at it as this negative thing, like, oh, I could never do that. I can't do that. Look at it as something to aspire to, or to motivate you, rather than what's the word I'm looking for? Rather than looking at it as this discouraging, I can never achieve that sort of thing. And I feel that even the able-bodied community is that way. It's looking at, magazine covers are kind of outdated at this point, but like, oh, I could never look like her. I could never do that thing, or whatever it is. It's like, sure you can. That's a much larger issue, and there's airbrushing and all that sort of stuff. But oh, that person looks really great. I wonder how they did that, or what I can do. And it's like trying to put a positive spin on it, which is so much easier said than done. But yeah, it's, I don't know, like, never give up. Sometimes you want to give up, and sometimes you do for a few minutes, but finding that inner strength and that inner motivation to be like, hey, we can do this. It's one step at a time.
So my final question to you, Maddy, before we wrap up and end the episode, and it goes a bit like this. If you had to summarize what we've been speaking about into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
Oh gosh, I don't like that question. That's a lot of things covered. All right. As I kind of mentioned before, persistence is progress, and no matter how discouraged you might be, there are always resources and people out there that you can relate to and that can help you on your journey.
Once again, Maddy, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Sorry?
Thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Of course. My pleasure.
If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends and do let Maddy and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging us over on Instagram at Madeleine Ruff Music and at James O. Roberts 11. And again, you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And in addition, if you had any additional questions, don't hesitate to shoot them over as well. And finally, don't forget to check out Maddy's music on Instagram. And you can find her at Maddy Ruff Music on Instagram. And as always, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk and click on the tab Resources. But not forgetting, and last but not least, I've also started a new Facebook group, especially for the podcast, which you can find by typing The Mindset Athlete. So make sure to check those links out. They will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipson.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.